Brian Wilson begins, not in a mansion or recording studio, but in a small house where musical genius first took root. Today, we're taking you on an exclusive tour through the homes that shaped the life of the mastermind behind the Beach Boys, from his humble beginnings to his final Beverly Hills estate. Brian Wilson wasn't just a musician, he was an architect of sound who transformed pop music forever. Born on June 20th, 1942 in Inglewood, California, Wilson possessed perfect pitch from infancy and was composing melodies before he could properly walk. By age 19, he had co-founded the Beach Boys with his brothers Carl and Dennis, cousin Mike Love, and friend Al Jardine. What started as teenage harmonizing in a family garage became a musical revolution that captured the essence of California dreaming and influenced everyone from the Beatles to modern pop artists. Albums like Pet Sounds and singles like Good Vibrations didn't just top the charts, they redefined what popular music could be. Paul McCartney has called Pet Sounds his favourite album, and it's widely considered one of the most influential records ever made. But Wilson's relationship with his homes tells a deeper story. Unlike many celebrities who collected properties as status symbols, Wilson's residences were intimately connected to his creative process and personal struggles. From installing recording studios in his living spaces to seeking refuge from the pressures of fame, each home represented a different chapter in his complex life. His net worth at the time of his recent passing was estimated at $100 million, built through decades of songwriting royalties, touring, and strategic real estate investment. However, that figure only tells part of the story. Wilson lost hundreds of millions when his father sold his publishing rights for a fraction of their value in 1969, a betrayal that haunted him for decades. Our journey starts at 3701 West 119th Street in Hawthorne, California, an address that no longer exists as it once was, now lying beneath the Century Freeway. But this modest two-bedroom home was where the Wilson brothers first discovered their musical chemistry between 1946 and 1964. The house may be gone, but its legacy lives on through a bronze plaque, marking it as the Beach Boys' historic landmark, featuring an image of the Surfer Girl album cover. This wasn't a glamorous beginning. The Wilson family lived in a working-class neighborhood 8 miles from the ocean that would inspire their music. Ironically, Brian didn't even visit the beach until he was 10 or 11 years old. When he finally saw the Pacific, he was overwhelmed by its vastness, an experience that would later translate into the expansive, ethereal quality of his compositions. The Hawthorne House was where young Brian would arrange his brothers in harmony around the family piano, where he'd spend hours experimenting with chord progressions that would later become classics. The living room became an informal rehearsal space, and it was here that Brian developed his ear for the complex vocal arrangements that became the Beach Boys' signature sound. The house's modest size meant that music was everywhere, you couldn't escape it, and perhaps that constant immersion in harmony helped shape the Wilson brothers' intuitive musical connection. Family dynamics in this small space were complicated. Brian's father, Murray Wilson, was an aspiring songwriter himself, but also an abusive parent who contributed to Brian's lifelong mental health struggles. The close quarters amplified both the musical collaboration and family tensions that would follow Brian throughout his career. Despite its humble appearance, this house was the launching pad for what would become one of America's most successful musical exports. As the Beach Boys' fame exploded in the mid-1960s, Brian Wilson made his first major real estate move, purchasing a home at 1148 Laurel Way in Beverly Hills in 1965. This was where Wilson lived with his first wife, Marilyn Ravel, from 1965 to 1967, during the peak of the Beach Boys' creative period. The Laurel Way House represented Brian's first taste of real success and luxury. Located in the heart of Beverly Hills, this property was a significant step up from his Hawthorne roots. The house featured multiple bedrooms, spacious living areas, and most importantly for Brian, the room and acoustics needed for more sophisticated musical experimentation. It was during his time at Laurel Way that Wilson was composing some of his most groundbreaking work. The house served as a creative sanctuary where he could work on the arrangements for Pet Sounds and begin conceptualizing what would become Smile. The larger living spaces allowed him to set up more elaborate recording equipment and host the session musicians who would become known as the Wrecking Crew. The Beverly Hills location also placed Wilson at the center of the music industry's social scene. The house became a gathering place for musicians, producers, and other creative minds of the era. However, it was also here that Wilson began to experience the pressure and anxiety that would later contribute to his retreat from touring and public life. This property marked a transitional period in Wilson's life. It represented both his rising success and the beginning of his withdrawal from the outside world. The comfort and privacy of Laurel Way allowed him to focus intensely on his music, but it also enabled the isolation that would become a recurring theme in his later homes. In 1967, Brian Wilson purchased what would become his most famous residence, 10452 Bellagio Road in Bel Air. This was a creative compound that housed one of the most significant private recording studios in music history. Wilson lived here with Marilyn from 1967 to 1978, and the property became the epicenter of his most experimental and innovative work. The Bellagio Road house was stunning in its own right, a substantial residence befitting a rock star at the height of his fame. But what made it truly special was Wilson's decision to convert the chauffeur's quarters into a professional recording studio. This wasn't just a hobby room with a few microphones, it was a fully equipped 16-track facility with quadraphonic capability, designed and built by Wilson and engineer Stephen Desper in mid-1967. The studio, sometimes called Beach Boys Studio or Brother Recording Studio, was revolutionary for its time. Wilson built it because he was frustrated with the limitations of commercial studios. Union regulations prevented him from touching the control board, and he had to book time in advance. Having his own studio meant complete creative freedom, and he used it extensively. 6 Beach Boys albums were recorded there, along with Wilson's famous bedroom tapes, intimate recordings he made in various rooms of the house. But perhaps the most famous feature of the Bellagio Road house wasn't the studio, it was the color. At one point, Wilson had the entire house painted purple, reportedly just to annoy his conservative Bel Air neighbors. This rebellious streak was vintage Brian Wilson, using his home as a form of artistic expression and subtle protest against the stuffiness of his upscale surroundings. Tragically, the studio was dismantled in 1972 by Wilson's then-wife Marilyn, who was concerned about Brian's increasing reclusiveness and the constant stream of musicians and hangers-on. Wilson later said, "If I could have anything in the world, I'd have a studio in my house again." The end of the Bellagio Road studio marked an end of an era in Wilson's creative life. 1982 to 1995, Brian Wilson lived in what was perhaps the most controversial chapter of his residential history, a Malibu home where he was under the 24-hour supervision of psychologist Dr. Eugene Landy. This was essentially a therapeutic compound where every aspect of Wilson's life was controlled and monitored. The Malibu property itself was beautiful, a beachfront home with stunning views of the Pacific Ocean. For most people, this would have been a dream residence. For Wilson, it became both a prison and a pathway to recovery. Dr. Landy's unconventional therapy program involved controlling Wilson's environment completely, from his diet and exercise routine to his social interactions and creative output. The Malibu house also played a role in Wilson's eventual liberation. It was here that he met Melinda Ledbetter, the car saleswoman who would become his second wife and ultimately help him escape Landy's control. The 1992 restraining order that finally separated Wilson from Landy marked the end of this strange and troubled chapter in his residential history. After breaking free from Dr. Landy's control and marrying Melinda Ledbetter in 1995, Brian Wilson sought peace and normalcy. One of the ways he found this was through a lakefront home in Lake Arrowhead, which he and Melinda purchased in 2012 for $2.1 million. The Lake Arrowhead property was a complete departure from Wilson's previous homes. This 4,500 square foot house wasn't about making a statement or serving as a creative hub. It was about family and tranquility. The home featured a more traditional East Coast architectural style with teak floors, vaulted exposed beam ceilings, and floor-to-ceiling windows that provided spectacular views of the lake. What made this property special was its family-friendly design. Wilson and Melinda had adopted 5 children together: Dakota, Daria, Delaney, Dylan, and Dash, and the Lake Arrowhead house provided a peaceful environment for raising their blended family. The home featured 4 bedrooms and 5.5 bathrooms spread across multiple levels, connected by both a grand staircase and an elevator. The entire lakeside wall of the house was glass, bringing natural light throughout the interior and providing constant visual connection to the water. For Wilson, who had spent so many years in various forms of isolation, this openness to nature and natural light was therapeutically important. Lake Arrowhead had long been a retreat for celebrities, offering privacy and natural beauty just a few hours from Los Angeles. For the Wilson family, it became a place where they could enjoy normal family activities, boating, fishing, and simply relaxing away from the pressures of the music industry. Wilson's real estate agent noted that the musician enjoyed having Brian up here and that Wilson had actually bought and sold 4 homes in the area over about 15 years, indicating that Lake Arrowhead became a favored location for him. The family eventually sold this particular property in 2019 for $2.85 million after initially listing it for $3.3 million in 2016. Brian Wilson's final home was a magnificent Beverly Hills estate where he lived until his recent passing on June 11, 2025 at age 82. This 9,300 square foot mansion, built in 1998, represented the culmination of a lifetime's worth of real estate decisions and musical success. The Beverly Hills home featured 6 bedrooms and 7.5 bathrooms, providing ample space for Wilson's blended family of 7 children and his wife Melinda until her death in January 2024. The property was located in a guard-gated community, offering the security and privacy that became increasingly important to Wilson as he aged and dealt with health issues including dementia. This final residence included all the amenities befitting a music legend: a family room for gatherings, a formal dining room for special occasions, living room for entertaining, media room for enjoying music and films, and even a maid's room for household staff. The house featured magnificent windows that filled the interior with natural light, a lovely pool for relaxation, and cathedral vaulted ceilings that may have reminded Wilson of the grand acoustic spaces he loved in recording studios. From a small house in Hawthorne, where 3 brothers first harmonized, to a purple mansion in Bel Air where Musical Revolution was recorded, to a peaceful lakefront retreat where a family found joy, and finally to a Beverly Hills estate where a legend lived out his final years. Brian Wilson's homes tell the story of one of America's greatest musical geniuses. What's most striking about Wilson's residential journey is how it mirrors his musical evolution. Just as his songs grew from simple surf rock to complex symphonic arrangements to intimate personal statements, his homes evolved from basic shelter to creative laboratories to sanctuaries of peace. In both his music and his living spaces, Wilson was always searching for that perfect harmony, not just of sounds, but of life itself. Today, while the homes have been sold and the recording studios dismantled, the music created within those walls continues to inspire new generations of artists and fans. Brian Wilson may have left us, but the genius that flowed through those rooms, from Hawthorne to Beverly Hills, remains eternal. Now, if you enjoy this journey through Brian Wilson's homes and the incredible life they sheltered, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Until next time.